The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to our webinar today. Our webinar is being presented by ABC's own Jeff Pergalski. Jeff joined ABC Computers as a network engineer in 2008 with 17 years of small business management experience. He possesses multiple IT certifications across a wide range of solutions, including HDI's Support Center Analyst. He holds 14 different Microsoft certifications, from Enterprise Admin to SQL Server Database Administrator, and is also a Microsoft Certified Licensing Specialist. I just want to remind everyone also a couple of things. If you have any questions, feel free to type them into the question box, and I will call them out to Jeff. And also, when our webinar is completed, I will be posting the recording to our website, which is abc-computers.com. So with that, Jeff, I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Abby. Based on that introduction, you actually think I know what I'm talking about, and that would hold up in front of everyone except for my wife and kids. So thank you all for joining us today. The topic is Windows Server 2003, End of Life. And for those of us in the IT community, Microsoft ending support for a server operating system is obviously a big deal. Server 2003 is very similar to Windows XP in terms of the bits that make up the OS, and so we had a little bit of experience when last year when Windows XP was end of life. So I guess we just want to reach out, remind everyone there are options, kind of refresh what a lot of us already know in terms of what next steps are, etc. So I've got a kind of fat slide deck this morning. I think it'll take me probably about 45 minutes. Abby's going to be monitoring the question queue, so if you have questions, please feel free to interrupt. And with that being said, I will get going. First off, a little bit about ABC Computers. For those of you who don't know, we do both infrastructure support as well as NAV implementation and support. 30-plus years in business, 50-plus team members spread out across the Midwest and a little bit further than that. So I started as a network engineer working on the infrastructure side, and actually my first Microsoft certifications were on Windows Server 2003, so I'm a little bit emotionally attached to it and sad to see it go. But the world of IT, you can't get attached to anything too closely because it is continually evolving. So, end of support, 173 days remaining. You see that on the calendar. July 14th is the end date. That's the important one to keep in front of you. It is at that point that Microsoft cuts the cord on it. They have given us plenty of time and plenty of notice. Server 2003 was released over 10 years ago. The R2 product, I guess, just under 10 years. But it's been around a long time, been a very stable platform. And in terms of, I guess, gathering some data, how long does it take for a typical server migration? Start to finish, that's 200 days. Application migration, 300-plus days, depending on the complexity of the application. So for those of you that haven't at least begun this process, you're a little bit behind. That probably isn't news to any of you, but do want to point that out. So 173 days to go. Let's get started. So what does end of support mean? Let's see, looks like it means end of the world. That giant flaming stream from the sky is heading right towards your data center. Actually, we all know that isn't the case. For those of us that have been in the industry long enough to see other OSs be end of life, you know that it still continues to function. It's just something that needs to be addressed. So doesn't necessarily mean end of the world, but certainly is something to be concerned about. So when it gets down to the nitty-gritty, what does end of support mean? Essentially, the most important thing is that it means no updates. 37 critical updates were released in 2013 for Windows Server. There were for Windows Server 2003. There were also a couple dozen that were released last year in 2014. And essentially those critical updates are ones that, from a security perspective, Microsoft is continuing to patch. Of course, the longer an operating system is out in the wild, the more time the bad guys and hackers have to pick away at it and find holes in it. Over the course of 10 years, you would think most holes have been breached, but the way new applications interact with the OS means there's always a chance that new holes develop. So when Microsoft ends critical updates, that means from a security perspective you should be very concerned, because obviously the hackers aren't going to stop picking away at it looking for new holes. Microsoft has just said, we've given you enough time. So no updates is a pretty big deal. The second thing that end of support means is that you are going to be out of compliance. Servers past the end of support time in just about every sense will not pass a compliance standard. Now obviously these compliance standards vary depending on the organization, but one of the big ones, the payment card industry, or PCI, that means that Visa and MasterCard will no longer do business with you if you're out of compliance. As far as how they audit you, etc., that's that there's still some gray area there, but certainly being out of compliance in any sense is never a good feeling. Third, no safe haven. So when it comes to ways to address an outdated OS, a lot of what we in the IT industry do, we think, well, maybe we can keep this, we can disconnect this server from the internet, so we'll reduce the exposure. If it's not connected to the internet, I don't have to be worried about hackers getting at it. I can keep it within my data center, only allow internal access to it, and those are all valid ways to kind of minimize the security concern. The problem is that ultimately you're still out of compliance. When software audits are done and identify OSs that are running within your infrastructure, it will still fail just about every kind of audit because the OS is out. So there are things you can do, like disconnecting these servers from the internet, but you're still not going to be in compliance. Also, whether it's a virtualized server, a lot of times in the course of the last 10 years, what we've been preaching to get the most out of our IT resources is to virtualize these instances, get them off old hardware. Maybe we don't have a replacement for that application that only runs on Server 2003, but we moved it into our virtualized data center, so it's on new hardware, humming away with our brand new servers, and we thought everything's okay. Regardless if it's a physical or virtual server, obviously it still has the same security flaws. This end of life also affects Microsoft's Small Business Server 2003, which was a very popular product. And just like any other IT expenditure, the longer you keep hardware, software within your environment, in general, towards the end of its life, there's increased operational costs associated with it. So, and last but not least, the discontinued support for a lot of applications that Microsoft applications such as Internet Explorer. When you're on an old version of the OS, you can only get up to a certain level of Internet Explorer in terms of being current, and so outside vendors are the same way. If you're looking to put software on, you can't install the latest and greatest in most cases because those applications aren't supported on the old versions. So no, 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 and now. We've added a consonant there. Now is the time to act. So start planning your migration and transforming your data center today. That sounds like a noble goal. And certainly if you haven't at least thought about it, now is the time. In terms of data center transformation, I guess that's kind of the next step here in terms of this presentation. You've got Server 2003 within your environment. You want to get it off. You need to upgrade. What are your options? And not only what are your options, but what's the rest of the industry doing? How is IT being leveraged? So these little boxes here of statistics basically are put together to show that there's an increased demand on IT. Cloud, 70% of CIOs will embrace the cloud-first strategy in 2016. That's next year already. So cloud-first, that's not just saying yes, we're okay to cloud, we're thinking about cloud. That's saying we're going to start with what can we do in the cloud and then work our way back. And then that last one, 45% of total IT services will be spent on cloud by 2020. So we're at a point where half our budget is going to be spent outside of our data center, and a lot of businesses are probably exceeding that number right now. But this is what Forrester predicts for everyone by 2020. So I guess the main point is that in the face of exploding need for technology to support the business, we have to transform our data center. And if we're still on Server 2003, we've got some opportunity here to make some changes and take advantage of the new technology. So when we look at what your opportunities are within your data center, what can you move to? The hybrid cloud is what I would say 80 to 90% of businesses are coming to are arriving at that decision. A hybrid cloud, again, is combining some on-premises resources with resources out in the cloud, and there's a lot of confusion because there's a lot of options on what you can do in the cloud, and basically what we're looking at here on the left, Microsoft Azure, and then going over what our other options are. Windows Server 2012 R2, which is the most current operating system for servers from Microsoft, Microsoft SQL Server, and Microsoft System Center. So what we're talking about in a hybrid cloud, what we have identified as hybrid cloud options, they need to be available on demand, so that elasticity is the word that we speak of. You have users that you need to add to your network. It's as simple as clicking into maybe your Azure interface and provisioning a few more. Unlike the old days when you ran out of either user licenses, certainly in the Server 2003 world, you needed CALs for each user. If you were going to add employees, you had to call a reseller, buy some CALs, install those CALs on the server. Maybe you also needed to add licensing for Office or some other applications. Maybe you didn't have the, you were already maxed out on hardware within your infrastructure, so you had to buy some hardware first. All those things are in the past when it comes to an elastic cloud option where you simply go and click to add users. It gets charged to your monthly bill, and these users are up and running with a few clicks. And then on the same token, when those users leave, if they're seasonal employment, if they're high demand times for your business and you need to add people, but that only lasts 3 months, when they're done, you can deprovision them. There's no longer long contracts. 1 year, 3 years, it's all month to month now, and in some cases in the case of virtualized computing resources, it's by the minute. It's how long you have your servers running. Can you shut them down at night? Being able to shut them down at night, saves you resources. So elastic, reduced cost and complexity. That's a lot of times talking to business owners about the cloud. The number one concern about the cloud is security, and the number two concern is complexity. This seems like it's going to be complex, and it's going to, I'm going to need to hire different sorts of IT staff. How does this, how does this save me money if I have to do those things? So it's got to be simple, and it's got to be cost effective. And then the other thing that cloud gives you is the rapid response. That provisioning, whether it's failover in disaster recovery, backups, it needs to be fast, and it has to be fast in response to what your business needs are. And so basically, the benefits of a Microsoft Cloud data center without boundaries, cloud innovation everywhere, and dynamic application delivery. These are, these are principles, I guess, that describe the in a general sense, but essentially, whether it's Microsoft's cloud or someone else, these are important changes compared to the world of Server 2003, where we were, mostly 10 years ago within our own infrastructure, and these in terms of how did we get our data center anywhere, how do we give anywhere access to it, and involves setting up firewalls, maybe VPNs, terminal servers. Now those things are going away, and basically the benefits to that: the speed, resilience, cost efficiency, and security. The security one is always tough for people to take. How can the cloud, with all the stories of Target being hacked and the banks being hacked and our government being hacked, how can that be safer than my own data center? And the answer is that when applying the same amount of interest to your data center as a hacker would to any of those other entities I just mentioned that have been hacked in the last year, they would get into your environment it's very rapidly, and because of that, Microsoft has recognized that security needs to be at the top of the list in terms of the design for these. So no one can these data centers are compliant with all the SAS 70, PCI, HIPAA. There are security is in the cloud is through Microsoft is extensive, and it's more than any small to medium-sized business can afford to do on their own. It's just they know how to do it. So security is a big deal, and rest assured that your data is more secure on Microsoft's cloud than it is within your own data center, with just a few tiny exceptions. The innovation everywhere talks about what your options are for cloud, using Microsoft System Center, using Microsoft Azure, a different cloud OS service provider maybe in your own infrastructure. The basic building blocks of your IT infrastructure are storage, networking, and compute. The compute would be the virtualized machines that are doing the work. So basically, cloud innovation, there's huge opportunities to save on storage. So the cost reduction in storage by using the cloud and getting off of Server 2003 is huge. The virtualization of compute and networking, that is critical to connecting people to the resources that they need and having those resources available. More and more of our customers are going international. It's no longer okay to have your data center be up from 6 a.m. until 6 p.m. or for taking it down a couple hours in the evening to do system maintenance. With international time zones, basically it's becoming just a fact of life that most data centers need to be up 24/7, and how you're going to accomplish that on your own is a tricky feat. So cloud innovation gives you the ability to take snapshots, to bring a server online and make the changes you need to, test it, and push it back, and then replace the existing production server, all without anyone else knowing, or without more than a 5-minute hiccup. So we'll kind of dig into those a little bit deeper here. Identity, also the security point of that is important as well. So the first that we're talking about in terms of your ability to improve your existing infrastructure over Server 2003 is in the storage space. Storage, and I guess using Windows Server 2012, it offers benefits specific to storage, such as virtualization with commodity storage disks, and tiering your storage in a way that allows you to save money. This graphic here shows an existing on-premise infrastructure that's got data from finance, HR, and marketing, and those are tiered in a way that gold, the finance data is gold, and that's our most important data. The HR data, silver, and marketing, bronze. They're all important, but finance and HR are more important than marketing. So how do you address that in your existing infrastructure? How do you address the different needs of that data? The fact that finance data needs to be live all the time. It needs to be redundant within the data center. It needs to be protected for disaster recovery, and it also needs to be protected from a backup sense. So you have file corruption, etc. How do you get back to good data? So the ways that you can do that, the JBOD, just a bunch of disks, so you can have multiple disks in a RAID array. You can have standard hard drives. You can have higher performing SSD drives that will give the users more, but there's all different ways to do this, and they're all very expensive on premise. So the way that you can do that in the way that I guess cloud can help is through Microsoft Azure and their Store Simple solution. It's cloud integrated storage. This Store Simple and this whole thought about cloud storage and all the benefits of it could be its own webinar, I suppose. So I'm not going to dig in too deep here. At a high level, what Store Simple and Azure gives you is the ability to use some of your existing on-premise resources and some remote cloud resources to put your data where it needs to be, and to do that using software essentially, so that you've got a SQL server that needs to be high performance, a high throughput of I/O, read-write. You can put that within your data structure where you need that, or you can put that in a virtualized instance and maybe put it on a server that is beefier than you can afford to buy because of budget constraints in Azure, and still give yourself the number of spindles you need and the performance you need, rather than buying a $50,000 SAN that's stuffed full of high-performing solid-state drives. You can create that same server in Azure and save a ton of money. You can also identify, this needs to be highly available. This needs to be in a redundant data center environment where this other data doesn't need to be. This other data is historical. Certainly historical stuff you can move out. You still need access. You can put it on lower performance machines within Azure. And I guess what you would do within your own environment, in terms of this is an old server, so I'm gonna we're not using it for anything else, but it still has some disk space, so I'm going to store some of my least important data there, the stuff that you don't feel comfortable completely deleting, but you also don't check it every day or maybe even every month. You can provision that same sort of stuff in Azure on really inexpensive machines that cost a couple dollars a month to keep provisioned. So storage has the opportunity when you're looking at migration to save a lot of money looking at the cloud option. The compute and network virtualization is the compute virtualization has been around forever, and that's what we're talking about, virtual machines here. There are, taking physical servers and creating virtualized instances of computing resources on those servers. That has been around for a long time now. Microsoft wasn't first to the game there, but with Hyper-V, they really have a strong solution that's baked right into the operating system, starting in 2008 and certainly continuing through to 2012 R2. The other part that is that's an important change here is the network virtualization that we talk about. So actually what network virtualization is, and it took me a while to grasp this over the past few years, but essentially giving you the ability, all the benefits of virtualization in the world of servers brought over to the network. So virtual servers are nice because you can move them around. They're flexible. They are easy to back up. They are mobile. You can push them to different hardware. You can push them to the cloud, pull them back down using Server 2012. The network virtualization then gives that same flexibility to your network. And networks, typically the network is, for our network engineers here at ABC, guys like Tony and Eric and the guys that love to play in that command line interface of configuring Cisco switches, creating VLANs, all of that stuff had to be done kind of in one-off environments. Your router, your switches, you were creating at each point, you had to do something to configure that to make it talk to the rest of the network. Now in Server 2012, a lot of that virtualization is being taken away from those sorts of devices and being put within the OS. So using software to create VLANs that give your network the security it needs, gives people the access, only the people you want to have access to machines, and not having elaborate firewalls to connect to the internet. You're creating a virtual network that makes Azure look, a machine located on Azure, look, feel, and perform like it's sitting in your own data center, setting up the same security boundaries, etc., that you would if it were within your own four walls. So that network virtualization is a big piece that has been further refined and advanced in Server 2012. And essentially, Microsoft Azure or a different cloud OS service provider connect to that physical network, and through the virtualization of networking, make that all seem like it's no big deal. Identity, we're talking about security here, and that's an important part of the cloud offering and the cloud consideration. Right now in the Server 2003 world, Active Directory, and I shouldn't say just Server 2003, but having an on-premise Active Directory within your Windows Server environment, that's something that most of us in the networking trade started with. We were comfortable with Active Directory users, permissions, etc. So that is replicated in the Microsoft Azure Active Directory, creating single sign-on that gives you the ability to use sync your network username and password, the same password that you sign into when you hit Control-Alt-Delete on your PC, gets you to log in everywhere you need to, whether that server that you're authenticating to is within your own environment or outside on a cloud provider. So that is all advances that are built into Server 2012 as well. So from all of those basic advantages and considerations in the cloud, we now take it back to the migration process, which is a 4-step process. So, for any of you IT managers on the call today, 4 steps, you should be able to bang this out in a couple days. Of course, I'm joking about that because these are all very complicated and important steps. But a 4-step process here: discover, assess, target, and migrate. So I will jump in there and start with discover. Obviously, there are tools. A Microsoft Assessment and Planning Toolkit specific to Server 2003 is available. There is a link, and we will, for those of you that want it, contact me or Abby. We'll get you the links to these tools. There are also tools from people like Dell that with their ChangeBase or Lakeside Software SysTrack that can help with just running to catalog what applications are running and what kind of workloads are in there. Also, if you're not comfortable doing that yourself and you want a little bit more help, Microsoft Services has a specific service offering called Jumpstart for Windows Server 2003 that will, in a pay-for model, help you develop a plan and identify what you've got and how you want to get off of those Server 2003 machines. Certainly Microsoft partners like ABC Computers can help. We have been doing that for years, and certainly other Microsoft partners as well can help you develop a plan to get current. So basically, what we're talking about, discover what you have. This is an example of a 8-server environment. On each of those servers, we've identified the main application that exists there, the owner, in a sense, of that server, in terms of the Exchange administrator. If your environment's big enough to have just an Exchange administrator, in most cases this is probably someone on the IT team, but you want to identify who is the important person and giving specific input to that server or that application. And then in the discovery role, you've got a couple different ways here. Is the server just running a server role like web server? Is it a Microsoft app that is running on that server, a third-party app, or the worst environment custom app? And I shouldn't say worst, but it's the trickiest to migrate. So in the discovery process, making a simple Excel spreadsheet like this, identifying the roles of the servers that need to be upgraded are, that's the first step. Next, you want to assess the inventory in a couple different ways, and we're talking about here doing it by type, by criticality, and by complexity. So we already talked about the types of servers, but what about how important they are? Mission critical or marginal, or can be retired? This is the time to start those discussions, and that has to be part of your factor. And then by complexity and risk, low, medium, and high, the easy to move applications and servers are going to be identified as low complexity, low risk, and of course those red ones are the ones we have to watch out for. So we assess our inventory, and then we put those same charts. We start to build this spreadsheet out, and which servers can we retire, which ones are critical, important, and we're starting to get now here a matrix of different considerations when looking at this. The next stage of the migration is to target your destination and evaluate options for each application and workload. And this is where we really start to get strategic in what our next steps are. And that's part of, I guess, why I kind of took a pause in the middle of this presentation to talk about what Server 2012 and Azure have for options, because it's at this point where you start to consider where you're going to move to that you want to know what's out there and what your options are. And so basically we're listing here Cloud OS Network for us probably is not at the top of the list, but certainly Windows Server 2012, keeping it within your own infrastructure, moving it to Microsoft Azure platform or Office 365 for certain solutions make a lot of sense. And as you start to build this target up, what are the high points of each of these offerings. For Server 2012, just a couple bullet points here: the hybrid applications, the network virtualization, virtual desktop infrastructure. These are all options that are baked into the Server 2012 OS. So you've got a lot of power and a lot of options should you choose to keep this hardware within your own data center. These are things to consider. When it comes to Microsoft Azure, it runs the gamut from basic web hosting all the way up to through infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, data as a service. Azure can do all of these things as well: virtual networking, data services. So that's it's important to understand what Azure is. And again, at ABC, we have invested heavily in Azure, both in expertise on our infrastructure support side, as well as starting to move our own internal applications out there and nav development environment, etc. We're huge fans of Azure, and if you have questions as to what it's like, etc., please contact us, because we're eager to share our knowledge. And I shouldn't say last but not least, but in terms of the third tier of our important consideration, Office 365, obviously for Exchange Mail, it's been a couple years now since I've had anything to do with an Exchange Server implementation on-premise. We are, on the other hand, moving people to Office 365's Exchange platform every week. So learning about Office 365 and what it means, it's not just a buying model for Office. It's a collaboration platform with SharePoint and Link tying into Exchange. It's really a cost-effective solution. One of the easiest ways to start to get to the cloud is through Office 365. Last but not least, the Cloud OS network for hybrid data center solutions. That's when you need custom beyond what Azure can give you, and you want someone else to kind of play the middleman there and help you. That's what the Cloud OS network does. These are all partners there on the right side of the slide that can help in that way. As I said, there's a lot of advantage for big global deployments for this sort of extra level of help in the migration and maintenance process, but for us, I think it's the first three that really provide the important considerations for migration. When it comes to analyzing where these applications are going to live from a targeting perspective, you have to remember that Server 2012 requires much more robust hardware than Server 2003 did. So does that mean, does that make it more appealing to you to keep it? Do you have excess capacity in your existing infrastructure already that you can leverage? That's something to consider. Or does it make more sense because all your hardware is older? Does it make more sense to maybe take a deeper step into cloud resources when it comes time to migrate? Next, analyzing the roles, and again, from file server to application server and everything in between. Where do these server roles make more sense to end up? Any of these could still stay on Server 2012 within your infrastructure. They could also be, out on Azure or Azure as a infrastructure as a service. And basically with all of these web server, all of these, I'm just going to kind of click through in the purpose of time. They all have Active Directory, terminal server. They can all exist in Azure. They can all exist on-premise still. You can make choices. Some, there are points that would give us, that would make us lean more one way or the other depending on your existing investment. But certainly from a server role perspective, you're not, that isn't going to, each role will lend itself to either staying within your infrastructure or being out on the cloud. Last but not least, the third-party and custom applications. Well, did the guy that wrote the program that you're running on 10 years ago, is he still around? Can you tweak it? can you get this to exist on Server 2012? Are you better off looking at a whole new solution for whatever that application is doing right now and looking at that hosted somewhere else? When it comes to the applications, you've got to, this kind of is the last part of how we're going to build our migration spreadsheet. Are the applications that are running on Server 2003 something that can be migrated as is? As in like Exchange. If you're going to migrate to Exchange, all you're going to do is move the mail data. The mail data doesn't need any sort of transformation to exist on the new platform. It just needs to be moved. Second choice is finding an alternate. So you just give up on that app because it's out of date. You can find something newer and cheaper to replace it with. Can you repair, rewrite, or refactor the application if you've got some some expertise on staff, or if you know that the application is supported by people who can change it to work with 2012? That's an option. The virtualized or shim, I guess that's the MacGyver solution. Are there some tweaks you can do? There's some tricks to get this application to still run in 2012. Might not be completely supported, but can you get it to work? And then last but not least, the obvious upgrade. Just can you upgrade the version of the application you're running, and will that new one work in the new system? From the Microsoft applications, those exist perfectly together with 2012 R2, SQL Server 2014. There are huge advances in SQL Server in terms of business intelligence. Their performance, so as you're looking at these applications and needing to move them from a OS perspective, what about looking at the application and potentially considering upgrading the application itself? Because in cases like SQL or Exchange or SharePoint, there are added functionality and performance benefits in the new version of the software, SharePoint included. You've got the ability to run that internally, but you've also got Office 365. And ultimately, when you put the target part in the mix, you've got a pretty full spreadsheet with a lot of variables, but it's kind of a one place to identify all the important information for each of these. And keep in mind, this is just a list for 8 different machines, but for each of these machines, you've got to decide, and maybe you decide that 2 of the machines you want to keep in-house, and 6 of the machines will either go to Azure or go to some other service to get rid of. Then you start to figure out how your IT spend looks, and are we buying any hardware? Are we just paying for services? What does this do long-term to our organization? Does this give us the business advantages that we're looking for out of our IT investment? So basically, this is what we hope you end up with as you're analyzing servers to go to and to get off of 2003. And the last part of the migration, which would not be lost on anyone in the IT, is that you actually the workload of migration. So the actual work of moving the data, of moving the applications, of moving the hardware. Do you do it yourself? Do you consider service offerings? Do you partner with someone like ABC to help, or can you do it yourself? And once you make those decisions and factor those in, I probably should have put a little bit more room on the spreadsheet, then you've got your plan, and then you can execute. So I think that brings me to the end. I've got one more slide here that talks about next steps. Getting started today. Experiencing innovations, I mean, basically that means doing your research and learning what your options are. And then on the right there, there's actually a specific Microsoft website that deals with Server 2003 migration. There's the informative websites that hit the high points of Server 2012 and Microsoft Azure and Office 365. Again, I mentioned the Migration Assistance Planning Kit. We've got those links that we'll follow up with for those of you that want it. But I think that is it, Abby. So did you have any questions? I think I covered a lot, so feel free to. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I do not have any questions at this point, Jeff. If anybody has any questions, feel free to type those into that question box. I'll call them out to Jeff. Also, while we're waiting to see if anybody has any questions, I just wanted to reiterate that we are going to post the recording of this webinar to our website, which is abc-computers.com. So if you want to rewatch, if you want colleagues to see the presentation, we'll have that available to you. And as Jeff mentioned as well, if anyone would like the slide deck or any other resources or have any questions that maybe you want answered in person versus with the group, you can contact us here at ABC Computers. Jeff is available, I'm available myself, and we'll get you the answers you need. Jeff, it doesn't look like we have any questions.
I must have just done a bang-up job then, or I've confused them all. But okay, great. Well, then that's all I have. Thanks, everyone, for your time. And Abby, I will let you wrap this up.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone, and we hope you have a great afternoon. We'll look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.